Okay, let's go ahead and get started. This is Birds, Barrios, Borders, and Books, Chicanx Poetics and Publishing from the Belly of the Beast. Thank you so much for coming today. But my name is Marisol Cortez, and I'm the executive editor of Deceleration, which is a grassroots media project that writes at the intersections of nature, culture, and justice in and for South Texas. I'm also a creative writer. I write poetry, I write fiction, I write creative nonfiction. I do a lot of hybrid genre stuff. Um, and um, and I'm speaking to you today from what we know colonially as San Antonio, Texas, but which are the unceded homelands of the Istokana, or the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe of Texas, and the roughly 200 bands, clans, and family networks that make up the Tapilam Coahuiltecan Nation. The Istokana know this land as Yaganawena, and the Tapilam as Yanawana. Carolina and Kamala are also here in San Antonio, and then Edward, who will be joining, he's running late, but he'll come in toward the end of the panel, is in McAllen, Texas, which is in the Rio Grande Valley, right on the Texas-Mexico border. And so my introduction to this panel will also kind of serve as my presentation as well, which I was calling Experiments in Praxis, Adventures in Deceleration. And I say was just because the talk that it's based on, I wrote in a not too much earlier political moment that nevertheless now feels light years away from the really terrifying one that we're in. And rereading that talk, I realized that kind of once more I needed to rethink my praxis in light of what's happening nationally and globally, which is to say, in light of the fascist takeover of the federal government, which is no longer creeping, but galloping full force. My earlier talk traced a decade of efforts to create ways of thinking and acting on climate, but environmental justice more broadly, kind of beyond dominant rhetorics of like apocalypse and crisis and their attendant political affects of panic and despair. But I find that now feels inadequate, like it's the vestige of this earlier kind of maybe easier political formation. On the one hand, the familiar neoliberalism of the Obama and Biden years, and maybe even the incompetent autocracy of the first Trump administration. But can anyone deny now that what we are living feels anything other than apocalyptic? Still, knowing that despair won't get us anywhere, I want to try to sift through what is useful still from those earlier efforts to cultivate affect and action beyond despair and panic. Kind of figure out what can still be salvaged from an earlier insistence, which Deceleration has always had, on the urgency of slowing down, which is they're words that come from a Kingian nonviolence trainer, Kazu Haga. So let me try to quickly summarize kind of that earlier talk in ways that I hope will set up this panel as a whole. So I've basically come to think of my working life as a writer and as a scholar activist as a series of experiments in praxis, efforts to understand the world that are rooted in struggles to change it, to invoke the traditional Marxist dicho. These experiments were set in motion when I made the decision over a decade ago not to pursue a more traditional academic trajectory, and to come home instead to San Antonio, which is where I'm from, to apply my scholarly training in the environmental humanities to movement struggles here, mostly around climate justice, but also I've done a lot of stuff around like the politics of development, and really trying to enact ways of thinking beyond development as a colonial paradigm. And so that has taken different forms over the years, and I've worn a lot of hats. Initially, I worked at a cultural arts nonprofit to develop a popular education program on gentrification as an urban land struggle. struggle both to decommodify and also to decolonize land. Later, I worked as kind of in an arts administration kind of day job, and I did community-based research and scholarly writing on the side, largely in support of mobile home residents who were fighting to remain in their homes after developers sought city approval to rezone that land alongside the San Antonio River for luxury apartments. And the big thing that I learned kind of from that chapter of my efforts was that just as I had felt like I was too much of an activist to really stay in academia, I was too much of a writer to organize full time. In the process of documenting what had happened at Mission Trails Mobile Home Community, I found myself writing poems, and especially when I came across fissures in the historical record where we couldn't interview somebody because they had died post displacement, or because they were too traumatized to talk about what had happened to their family. And I had wanted those poems to be part of the report that we released, which was sort of very scholarly in its execution. But the group that I was organizing with thought that they would undermine the legitimacy of the kind of hard data that we had collected from interviewing those families. And so those excised poems were the beginning of a shift in my own praxis, kind of away from like urgent reaction to crisis, the work of sort of constant agitated confrontation with power, to a slower politics of imagination and prefiguration that really tried to take a lot of that energy back, that political energy back from the powers that be, in this case at the local level, and put it into neighbors, put it into more than human relatives. A lot of that shift came out of just my own frustration at feeling like we were fighting the same fight over and over and over again and always losing, and the burden that takes on you, like mentally and physically. Like I needed a different way of working, right? For my own well-being. And a lot of the shift too was embodied in my feeling that I needed to take my creative writing, the poetry, as seriously as I had taken activism and scholarship. So I ended up publishing the Mission Trails poems as like a micro-run chapbook. It's called I Call on the Earth. This is in English, and then I worked with a translator, Edis Rodriguez, to do a Spanish language version as well. Since the majority of the families we interviewed were predominantly Spanish speaking. And then I finally also finished a cli-fi novel that I had been working on for years at that point, Loose at Midnight, which Edward's Flower Song Press eventually published. And both of those books were really kind of a return for me to ways of writing that had been like breathing to me as a young person, but which I'd shelved as an academic and then later as an organizer. And there's different, kind of ways that like academia and organizing tells you like, that so many other things are much more important than that kind of writing. The writing that we do for academic publication or in support of social movements, I think depends a lot on like conviction, on knowing, on staking a claim in the quest to persuade, right? Whether that's other academics, or whether that's people in power, policymakers who are trying to make different decisions. Fiction, storytelling, poetry felt like this alternative praxis, a different way of doing both theory and organizing, but one that was really freed from the need for conviction or certainty. Instead, it felt like it could be grounded in what I didn't or maybe couldn't understand about power, about desire, about San Antonio, about how to respond effectively to these colonial crises of climate disruption. and ultimately about whether effectiveness is even the proper object of collective action at all. Maybe I started to think it's actually small, slow, but genuine cultivation of relationships with the many tiny, ordinary others in our barrios, las plantitas, los animalitos, el agua, los vecinos, los pájaros, which persist in the unsupervised scars of highways and inland refineries. And so that's actually like the theme of my third book, which is called The Bird Church, which ended up being a poetry collection that kind of dwells on these barrio ecologies, as I call them. And I don't have a copy of the book to show you, but I'll share the cover here. This was the artwork is from a painter here, an artist friend of ours, Alice Canastero Garcia, who goes by Pájara as her artistic name. And I'll just read you a really short little poem from the book that kind of illustrates this idea of barrio ecologies, and it's inspired by the ornamental citrus that grows in a lot of the yards here on the west side of San Antonio. It's called Found Fruit. Found a solitary small orange on the ground, out walking the block. First walk postpartum with the baby wrapped up against the rush of viejitas cooing and clutching like mourning doves. And some viejitos too. My people, mi gente, mi barrio. Sky mid-February gray. Where'd that orange come from then? Single spot of color blown onto the sidewalk. No tree in sight. Last of late winter west side citrus. The backyard ornamentals too hard for viejitas to pick. Whatever the case, I peel and eat it once home, feeling pale, golden fingers of fruit steeping like sunshine into my milk. And boy, is it good, almost perfect. A high note of tang, wild as night wind, whistling at the top of unseen trees. But the other project that kind of came out of this shift from reactive confrontation with power to creative imagination is Deceleration. And Deceleration is an online journal of environmental justice thought and praxis for South Texas, which I've co-edited with my partner, Greg Harmon, for the past almost 10 years now. Greg is an environmental journalist by training. And so I'll show you what it looks like really quickly. So this is Deceleration. And it has multiple origins. But one of the biggest has been both of us, our ongoing search for a climate justice praxis that moves beyond rhetorics of apocalypse and the reactive, even eco-fascist politics that can sometimes generate. Of necessity, we cover the climate and human rights failures of local and national power structures, but we also seek to make visible the multiplicity of tiny efforts already underway to create the world we long for. As an experiment in writing, not just to resist, but to collectively re-inhabit, Deceleration embodies an affective shift in our work from no to yes, from despair to desire, from fighting back to fighting forward. We're inspired by degrowth movements in the global north and by indigenous calls for sumak cauce in the global south, or buen vivir in Spanish. We also find a lot of resonance in Adrienne Marie Brown's concept of emergent strategy, which questions, quote, the capitalistic belief that constant growth and critical mass is the only way to create change, emphasizing critical connections over critical mass. Like all of these experiments in praxis, moving from thinking and writing to doing and being, all of us on this panel wear these multiple hats. We all kind of walk between these worlds of academia, activism, art. We're all creative writers, We're all flower song authors, which is actually what kind of originally sparked the idea for this panel. But as writers, our work is also deeply embedded both in the places that we're from, in comunidad, and in other practices from teaching to activism to visual arts to care for the animals and plants in our yards and our neighborhoods. We're all people writing and fighting against environmental racism and colonialism in South Texas, belly of the beast. We're writing and fighting for climate justice and human rights. And two of us, Edward and I, are also editors whose indie publishing projects are mostly grounded in Chicanx and Latinx communities here in La Frontera, in what Jose Limon calls Greater Mexico. And so we're here today to speak about all of that work in the hopes that there are lessons there also for your struggles and the beloved home places and communities that you bring to your work. My question for myself now is whether this focus on the experimental, the slow, the small scale, the emergent, the barrio, is that enough anymore, right? When we know that our family, our friends, our neighbors are being snatched off the streets, disappeared by flash floods, disappeared into concentration camps, when we are told it's too late to do anything about climate change. To be honest, I don't know. It is so hard to live in Texas right now, and it has been for many years. In so many ways, our state government has been a laboratory for the authoritarian cruelty now unleashed across the country against those we call immigrants, but many of whom are actually original to this continent, but also against trans people, against brown and Black people, against poor and disabled people, against the earth itself. I don't know. But I do know that writing and publishing, that preserving a space where we can speak up for the vulnerable, where the vulnerable can tell their own stories, feels like the most important thing that I can do right now. And so I end by just coming back to a few things that I've read just in the past week that kind of give me sustenance that I want to pass on to you. The first from peace studies scholar John Paul Lederach, who writes, while the moment may have arrived here in the US for a spectacular mass movement, ultimately what makes its growth possible is the spread of critical yeast. By this, I mean the quality of small pockets of unusual relationships that make a difference where they live. Yeast is the smallest ingredient in bread baking, but the only one that helps everything else grow. And one from climate justice turned pro-democracy organizer Daniel Hunter, who says, the point is not to outrun the storm. The point is to plant your feet, link arms, and say, I still see what is true. And from trans journalist Evan Urquhart, who writes about the power in this moment of being what he calls a, quote, preserver, someone who works to keep people, ideas, art, or knowledge safe in the hopes of better times to come. That is the work before us here in the belly of the beast. So let me introduce each panelist, or I'll introduce them one by one before they present their own work in their own words, all of which is so important to everything that we're doing here. So we'll start first with Carolina Hinojosa. Carolina is a Chicana, Tejana, and Mujerista poet, freelance writer, and storyteller whose work focuses on faith, social justice, and the environment. She is the author of Becoming Ostototl, which is a flower song press publication, and a collection of poetry, and other work can be found in On Being, The Rumpus, The Accentos Review, Lookout Magazine, Rock and Sling, A Journal of Witness, and more. She holds an MA in Literature, Creative Writing, and Social Justice from Our Lady of the Lake University, and is currently a PhD candidate in English at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Carolina.
Gracias, Marisol. That was a great introduction. I really like this idea of critical yeast. It reminds me of, I had never heard of that, something I'm going to start to think about more. It reminds me of Anna Singh in her The Mushroom at the End of the World, where she talks about a third nature. where what presses on despite capitalism. And so hopefully today, I want to share with you all some field notes or some digital field notes that I've been playing with. I am a poet. My last book or chapbook is Flower Song Press's. It came out with Flower Song Press called Becoming Costototl, which means becoming yellowbird. Cosototl is a Nahuatl word that means yellowbird. And so I want to explore, moving along from that chapbook, then exploring field notes, right, as poems, as these visual interstices. I'm writing a dissertation right now, so it's very academic forward, even though I do have liberty to write the personal, it really does become difficult to sort of merge the two. I feel like I have an academic brain and a creative brain, and they often clash. I'm working through that at the moment, and so these field notes they help very much so with that. So let me show you. I think that'll help. I'll call them, or I'll present them here. I call this Fisgona field notes, Fisgona, Fisgane, Fisganex field notes, plants, waterways, and airways. This idea of being Fisgona, like an entremetida, or to be somebody that's nosy, sort of feels like a powerful dynamic, again, in the climate that we live in, where sometimes it's a luxury to live out loud, right? Or it can become a privilege to um to be out loud. I don't know. So Fisgona for me is sort of this being this nosy neighbor, like looking in and peering in to hold this sort of power. Anyway, this first sketch here is from a sketch I did for a Digital Field Methods Institute at the University of Texas for their DFMI Institute. This is called Nopal Map, which I sketched here onto a notebook. Donde nos toposamos. Location, network vein 828. Temp, -10 degrees Fahrenheit, o sea que frío. Time, opuntia. Container, fibrous. Life forms, cochinil, red dye, crawls on waves. Conditions, mucilage, vavas. Saliva, viscous. Secretions. Colors, temporary. We've met here before, near the Queen Nopal, destroyed by Storm Yuri. ¿Te acuerdas? Remember? So that is my first entry, or my first field note, if you will. Sort of reminiscent of Storm Yuri that happened here in Texas. This second entry is composed of two images that are a recording of my daughter's voice, resulting in sound waves. So I rendered two different and distinct sound waves of her voice to create an image of a nopal. I juxtapose them onto each other. So the digital here is an interjection and an invitation to be entremetida. I'm entremetida, or to be entremetida is an interjection with no clear break to interrupt a connection. And so here I asked if the connection is between her and I, her and the nopal, or the nopal and the sound waves, what is the interjection here? And it blurs the lines between the human and the more than human being. So, entremetidas con el nopal. Mijita laughs loudly at something I've said. She tells me to say it again. Though I have forgotten, I make up more words. She laughs. I make up words that sound futuristic, resonate in the throat, use the glottal as an accordion. Words like obuntia, nopaleando, explodanteles. She laughs in an array of tunas, prickly, protective, re-sounding. She tells me to make up more words. More, more, more. Make new words. More words, Mom. Make the newest words. I want to hear them.
Mm.
So in this third rendition, or where I'm moving on to, though before we move on, I do want to give a quote here by Ansaldúa from her Geographies of Selves. In her book, or in her what was to be her dissertation, Light in the Dark, Luz en lo Oscuro, Rewriting Identity, Spirituality, and Reality. She says, we're not just the individual or material árbol de la vida, that is our life. We are also las cosas y gente que pasan a nuestros alrededores, whether these be concrete metropolis or green environments. And so we are made of everything that surrounds us. And if we're energy fields, then we are also waves, sound waves, speaking, laughing, motion, all of these energies. And so that is what sort of led me into this particular project of Entremetidas with the nopal and sound waves. My third entry here is going to be going to take us to South Texas, to SpaceX, to where Starbase is in Boca Chica, which I think it was last year. Again, I'm writing a dissertation, so my years are sort of like collapsed on top of each other. A couple of years ago, I was able to make it out on the way to UTRGV. We sort of did a U-turn to go see what was going on over there. So this next field note entry is made of different photographs that I would like for you to reflect on, and we can discuss if time allows, or just for you to settle with it if you have a pen and paper. If you just want to reflect on these, I invite you to do that. So we could do that together as we're building, rebuilding, resounding. Where do you begin and I end? What ecological impact does this interruption have on our everyday lives? What and who grows through the fissures of human-made disruption? And that specific quote from Anna Singh is, imagine first nature to mean ecological relations, including humans, and second nature to refer to capitalist transformations of the environment. The usage, not the same as more popular versions, derives from William Cronin's Nature's Metropolis. I then offer third nature, that is, what manages to live despite capitalism. To even notice third nature, we must evade assumptions that the future is that singular direction ahead. Like virtual particles in a quantum field, multiple futures pop in and out of possibility. Third nature emerges within such temporal polyphony. Same place, a different direction, facing a different direction. A nopal can hold gallons upon gallons of water unknown to the everyday gaze. But the Fisgona knows. She sees it in the oceans, the gulfs, streams, rivers, and all waterways, including the boca, the mouth. And so I want to give time for reflection. I'm not sure how much time I have. We can move on to Kamala and come back.
I can go ahead if you want me to. I mean, whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. My dog moved over where earlier today he pulled out the cord that runs my modem. So I didn't want to disappear completely.
Yeah. I do want to bookmark your questions, Carolina, and also maybe just come back to for folks that don't know about SpaceX in South Texas and sort of the incursions of space colonialism, right? And what the struggle over Boca Chica. So I feel like we should come back to that. But Kamala Platt is a public scholar, an author, and an artist in South Texas and at the Meadowlark Center in Kansas. Currently, she tends her yard, the Garden of Good Trouble, and Animal Companions in San Antonio's West Side. Her creative publications include Gravity Prevails from Flower Song Press, 2022, Weeds Lovers, which is from Finishing Line Press, 2014, On the Line from Wings Press, 2010, and Quinientos Wordsworth, 1992. She's a founding scholar of environmental justice, cultural criticism, and author of Environmental Justice Poetics, Cultural Representations of Environmental Racism from Chicanas and Women in India from De Gruyter, that came out just recently in 2023. Kamala.
Okay, thank you. And there are going to be a couple earlier references to Boca Chica too. So that was a reason that I thought this might sort of come in and out. But I'll start out reflecting on my title. After Gravity in my title refers to my poetry collection and also to the discombobulation that comes with the loss of familiar force that anchors us even as we resent its pull to earth. In 1995, Mahmoud Darwish wrote the questioning line, "Where should the birds fly after the last sky?" in his elegy for his great friend, fellow Palestinian Edward Said, upon Professor Said's death. I chose the phrase for its literal meaning that resonates with the 6-year San Antonio community's struggle against the mission of official harassers to displace egrets, herons, and cormorants from our city parks. And I chose the phrase for the larger sense of loss, extending to the ends of the sky that is felt in immense personal mourning and in the existential mourning of losses across communities and even planetary hemispheres. And considering the gravity of the tripartite political siege upon South Texas ecological and cultural continuity that contributes to climate and civic chaos, these poems, most of them were written 15 years ago, resonate with the region's current everyday and often existential experiences, which intimately connect us with places much beyond. The book's cover, I'm going to show you, I know you can see, portrays a Gulf fritillary butterfly on an amaranth frond, both symbols of resistance and rebirth innate to my Garden of Good Trouble, named in July 4 years ago and a year after John Lewis's death. Today, July 17, on the Good Trouble Lives On Day of nationwide action, I read in honor of his immense call to make good trouble, necessary trouble. When I wrote my abstract, and here I'm referring to something that Marisol already talked about. So again, there's resonant or repeats. When I wrote my abstract in early January, I could not have fathomed the intensification of these feelings and resulting commitments for so many of us in El Valle, yes, and in cross-cutting ripples that touch all shores. So I'm going to go straight into some poems that I could have chosen many others, but these I sort of fit together. I'm not sure. Anyway, the first one is Borderland Trilogy in 4 stanzas, double haiku sandwich in the binational owls of El Jardín. Palabras embrace en braceros palabras. Chichara summers. Winded drones become killers. Unmanned means no soul. According to the men who hold vigil over the sad wall building in Hope Park, there are 3 white owls that live in Hotel El Jardín, fly out pre-dawn to hunt along the river. They flap wings slow by the Chisholm trailhead, quicken their flight into Mexico each night, and return over the river in the morning to roost in the abandoned by people Garden Hotel, to rest in the US. Tejas afternoon, gunfire across the river. Our arms reach their shores. I did the next couple selections are from a trilogy of poems that has the overall title of Emigrantes Ambientales. And that's with an E, it's emigrantes, people coming, bringing something. And this one is called After Fallout. Fallout comes in the color of warblers here. The birds blew in following April chill storms, swallows piling high to stay warm. Some suffocate as others die for lack of food. No insects moving as temperatures glide down. We will live from crisis to crisis now. In January, temperatures bottom out, turn comforter covered community garden plots to compost fodder, spoiling New Year's feasts. Hypothermic sea turtles, progeny of 100 million years, are warehoused, bathed in plastic kiddie pools by early responders hoping to reverse genocide. We will live from crisis to crisis now. We will live from crisis to crisis now. What of the next generation? What of the 7th? And then from the 3rd poem, the ending, and it's called Paddling Together. It's going on a canoe down the Rio Grande. Around a bend in time, steel and concrete pop up like running bamboo sprouts. They are leftovers of a faraway war, warmed over, soldered with the heat of fear, a border wall to still someone else's demons. Ours bounce back and forth like in an ancient ball game. We all create crisis, live crisis now, unabated because they stimulate economies and win elections. Earth and her people are collateral, are damaged goods, are sacrificial flesh. I reach out of the canoe to place a memorial wreath on the waters where those who reached el otro lado entered heaven, while their comrades paced onward, not yet knowing the Estados Unidos might be hell, knowing only they needed work to pay bills, feed families. None of us knowing all Earth is in crisis together. None of us knowing 7 generations are in crisis together. And I'm going to see if I can find my, I'm going to now read a couple or selections from a couple found poems. And the first one is from April Litany of Fools Waivers, an elegy found in the words of the Secretary of Homeland Security with a Greek chorus. And this is a series of waivers. I think you can see they go on for quite a ways. There's, I think, 40 of them. And I'm not, and the chorus then takes from his words and says, "High illegal entry." It's a fun sort of performance poem when I have a lot of people and we can do it. But it starts out, said the Archangel Calavera in 2008 on April Fool's Day. You'll remember the date. In order to deter illegal crossings, there is presently a need to construct fixed and mobile barriers in the vicinity of the border of the United States. In order to ensure expeditious construction of barriers and roads that Congress prescribed in the area of high illegal entry, I have determined that it is necessary that I exercise the authority that is vested in me. Accordingly, I hereby waive in their entirety with respect to the construction of roads and fixed and mobile barriers, the following laws as amended. The NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, Endangered Species Act, Water Pollution, National Historic Preservation, Migratory Bird, Clean Air, Archaeological Resources, Safe Drinking Water, Noise Control, Solid Waste, Comprehensive Environmental Response, Archaeological Historical Act, Antiquities, more historical, Farmland Protection Act, Coastal Zone Management, Federal Land and Policy, National Wildlife Refuge, Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Administrative Procedure, Rivers and Harbors of 1899, Eagle Protection Act, Native American Graves Protection and Reparation Act, American Indian Religious Freedom Act, the Federal Grant and Cooperative Agreement Act of 1977. I reserve the authority to make future waivers from time to time as I may determine to be necessary, said the Archangel Calavera in 2008. April Fool's was the date. And I wrote an epilogue after that to this elegy, and I'll just read it. The very beginning, I share this found elegy in hopes that we take these words to our communities, our churches and synagogues, temples and mosques, that we take them to our houses and our schools and to our House of Representatives and to our White House and to our courts of justice. I share this elegy in hopes that we recite it in places we hold sacred, whether in the wilderness or in the gatherings of people, whether in the borderlands or the heartland or the coast, all in the US. Hear this litany of rights and know what we in the borderlands del Valle have lost. And yes, we shall translate it into all languages spoken in our nation and in our world so that all understand what has been enforced against the communities of the Rio Grande Valley. And of course, well, I don't need to say anymore. I'm going to go on to the found poem that came out of border comments that I had written in fall of 2007, a public comment period for the border wall, born into poetry on the day of the 67th Nakba in Palestine. It would be the most mean-spirited continental irony to diminish the commons as the main point of confluence, but that is precisely what is proposed. Dichos and research tell us neighborly people keep the safest neighborhoods. In our daily wisdom de la frontera, the truism applies to countries as well. Our homeland is secure when we are respectful to our neighbors, engendering their understanding of us, the goodwill toward us. We borderlanders, fronteristas, protect our commons, which in turn protects us. Before cross-border shopping, immigrant labor, ecotourism, before the border itself, we shared ecosystems and cultures. Those original brushlands, river deltas, coastal plains, now altered or destroyed, left behind remnants that we on both sides and ambos lados hold in common. The destruction of the trust we hold with Mexico in our common natural heritage will take with it the confianza, shared respect between neighbors, the irreplaceable events of every morning and evening in the nexus of migratory routes for birds and butterflies, in the meeting of tropics and subtropics, in the emerging of Gulf waters, coastal wetlands, and inland brushlands, in the watershed of the Rio Grande and the Arroyo Colorado, and in the mezcla of Boca Chica Beach, where two countries, one Rio and one Gulf, converge. And one One more mention of Boca Chica that comes up in my poem. How am I doing? Rio Grande Bravo watershed, and it's about butterflies and insects and their place in the border in the Rio Grande Valley. What do they think when presidential tweets threaten El Valle, the damsels and dragons of Santa Ana, the soldiers and queens on Greg's Mist Flowers at Mission's National Butterfly Center? Do nightmares descend upon pollinators when they hear of the border wall's second coming? Do Trumpian wars for walls trigger ancestral memories of fleeing the infiltration of steel and concrete into the borderlands back in 2008? And of course, we have had Abbott's wall building as well now. Do yucca giant skippers pause on the Spanish daggers at Boca Chica Beach to recall the tales of canoeists arriving at the small mouth of the Grand River, the eastern end of their trip against a wall, along a river, and into the sea? Do insects wail at the waivers, rejuvenated from April Fools in 2008, waivers that spew filth in the air and water and on the sacred indigenous vows to protect? Do the chicharas suddenly shudder, scream, or weep? Do the mariposas suffer silently, lose the color on their wings like mourners? Maybe they just curl up and crust over. And if I have time, I'm just going to read a little bit of the second half of my fracking poem, which Rebecca always said she liked so much. And it's the hopeful side. So that's why I wanted to skip that in here yet. So take the fracking and shovel it, build loam, restore monte, invite in immigrantes to return, remember La Paz, forget the Alamo, let it crumble, feed the soil, intermingle with the bones of the pre-Columbian ancestors of this place. Let Loquat and persimmons grow, let Los Alamos grow back. Remember, La Paz is the treaty of two eagles, dos abuelas, protecting lands and people on ambos sides from each other and from themselves, and in both lados of a river that is confluence more than barrier, like the rivers of San Antonio, Arascosa, Aransas, Frio, Nueces, Guadalupe, and their arroyos. That the land between these waterways is Indian always, as Gloria noted with a pen that draws dips in deeper than sword, than plowshare, than drill. Let the earthworms and microbes return to this land, undo the impact of the trucks and soften the soil, darken it for our kin. The gente of generations going forth will follow when we begin to heal their lands. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Kamala. It's awesome. And I saw Edward just joining us. So we are really excited to have Edward Vidaurre with us. Edward is an award-winning poet and author of 9 collections of poetry, although when you sent me that bio, maybe you have another one. Do you have 10 now? You have a lot. He is the 2018-2019 City of McAllen, Texas Poet Laureate, a 2022 inductee to the Texas Institute of Letters, and the publisher of Flower Song Press, which published all of our work and allowed us to share what we do with our community and with the world. His writings have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the Texas Observer, the Los Angeles Review of Books, and other journals and anthologies. Vidaurre resides in McAllen, Texas, with his wife Liliana and daughter Luisa Isabella. All right, Edward.
Hello. Okay. So catch me up. Will I be? You need me to be reading?
Yeah, anything that you want to share.
Okay.
Like, so basically, we are just sharing the work that we do from the belly of the beast is kind of the Chicanx poetics, Latinx poetics, and publishing.
Right.
We all kind of like wear these multiple hats, right? Where
Right.
we're creative writers, but we're doing a lot of other stuff too at the same time. Our work is deeply embedded in the community. And also, you know, like the act of publishing, right? Of publishing others' words as a means of resistance and community building, right? Like in South Texas. So anything you want to speak to about Flower Song, or if you want to share your own poems or
Right. So we're in the middle of putting together about 4 anthologies, all of them, you know, with having to do with the political landscape of our time. And one of them has to do with women's rights. The other one has to do with, you know, just rights overall, with, freedoms being taken away as well from our, you know, education systems and our, National Endowment of the Arts and other areas. Also, looking at an anthology that's working on uh, the climate and things going on in our environments and stuff like that. So I think a lot of the poetry that's coming through right now to Flower Song Press is very political, is very it's rooted in activism. um, because we are a Latinx press. um, it's very difficult not to, you know, get away from those sorts of writings at the moment. Um, yeah, there are books that are going through that have nothing to do uh an idea with the political, but because it's the voice of the Latinx writer, everything is political. You know, so it's how could I say it? It's not done on purpose, but it speaks of activism. It speaks of, that fight for rights. And so, um it's hard not to read poetry nowadays by a Latinx writer that does not have that sentiment. I try, when I'm reading the poetry that comes through, to see, something other than that. But I think it's necessary for our times, because these are the books that they want to take away from us, but they're also books that, if they survive, will be speaking of the history of our times, which is, extremely important, because growing up, I didn't have that. We did have the marches of the Brown Berets down the streets of Los Angeles when I lived over there. When I was a little boy, I would, see those things happen. And the women were very strong in the activism there in our neighborhood, um, fighting for better pay, fighting, the local housing authorities for more respect, and more, a demand for better living, and still trying to fight their bosses, or even, you know, kind of not use the strength at work because of fear of losing jobs. So, it's very, humbling to read a lot of the work that's coming in now. Very powerful work from women. I've always thought the words and the things that women do are much, stronger than men, because, we will cry over a cold, and women overcome it, and take care of the whole family. They're naturally nurturing. So there's uh there's a lot of excitement, if that's the word to use, for a press that's also trying to be suppressed by, governments and people out there. But we continue to fight. I would say, it's hasta la muerte. You have to we have to stop breathing for us not to continue. And even then, you know, just as we lost a poet from Colorado recently, a queer poet, uh, and she or I'm sorry, their work continues to speak loudly even after, after life. So that's what we want to do as a press. We want to live on. Uh, we want our authors to continue to live on, just as we look at the you know authors and poets of the past, and venerate and hold them up high as important figures in our literature today. I believe that we are creating so many uh Toni Morrisons and Gloria Salduas and right now living. So it's exciting. It's exciting and it's scary at the same time, and it brings out the best and the worst in people. But I think that the good will prevail at the end.
Have y'all have y'all had any of your funding like clawed back or your I don't know, I can't remember if y'all are a nonprofit or
We're
like
not a
to
no.
Mhm.
No, we're not a nonprofit, but there were opportunities, to apply for an NEA grant as an individual as well, which is no longer on the table. But we are looking to become a nonprofit, but we do piggyback off nonprofits if someone wants to give a big donation. Um, in that way, we're able to help the nonprofit, and they help us, and we kind of help each other. And so, yeah, it's been difficult. I think people are giving less and buying less right now, but we still find a way to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know for deceleration, that's been kind of like one of the things we've had to sort of scenario plan around because we do have a 501(c)(3, and it feels like it's not really a question of like if we lose our nonprofit, it's more like when we lose when we lose our nonprofit status.
Right, right.
Really, thinking like under the current administration, the even having that feels like a liability in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Is it
I
going?
just, yeah, I just feel that once they get wind
Yeah.
that, uh, I mean, they'll even take away like tax breaks from people for the purpose of giving to the arts. So those people with the big pockets and say, hey, at the end of the year, I want to give $10,000 to a nonprofit or to an arts, collective, and they find out that that's not going to be part of a tax break, that they
Mhm.
will pull it, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
because money is power to some people, and some people, they love giving, but they also don't like it being taken away if they have a say.
Mhm. Well, is there anything that you're working on right now that you would want to share, like in terms of reading your own work or something you're excited
Um,
about?
well, I'm excited about my new book. It's called El Viejo, and it's out of from El Martillo Press out of Los Angeles. And I I'm gonna I'm trying to tour it as much as possible with the schedule that I have at work and at home. But I've been able to, set up a bunch of stuff for Texas. And hopefully, I think I have one reading in Los Angeles in September, and looking forward to going, to El Paso, and places that are a little farther away from where I live here in the borderlands. But yeah, I mean, this is something that I'm really excited about. It's my 10th collection. Um, it's it's got a lot of stuff that's political in here, like some of my other books, and a lot of wrestling with my own faith. But I see that even after this book, now that this book is out, how I've still changed a little bit into a different view on spirituality and my own faith and the things that I'm finding that are bringing peace into my life and that are working, and what are the things that didn't work for me when I was resisting, allowing love to enter my heart, and I just feel that it's you know being an activist at times sometimes hardens us and sometimes doesn't allow for the good to come into our life, or at least for myself. So practicing mindfulness and just being kind to others when I want to not be kind, I notice that it helps. The different things I watch on television also have a lot to do with the way I feel sometimes, because I think that if you're watching a lot of things that trigger certain things, it's difficult to get out of that once you're in it. It's like, you know, getting pumped up before a football game, and you see them that they're jumping up and down and they're getting ready and they want the adrenaline to go. Um, they're just ready to run and fight. So that's, I think, the way it is with, like, before I go to bed, if I'm watching something on TV that's, high speed chases and bullets flying and stuff like that, I don't think I go to sleep at peace. So I am looking for things and I'm working on things that help me become a better person and more mindful and kinder, and something that's making me, I think, a better all around person to everyone that I encounter. Otherwise, if I don't feel well and if I think I'm going to snap, I'll just stay home, you know, and just let me get out of my own rut. But yeah, I think um, uh, the press is still strong, and a lot of the past titles like uh, yours and Kamala's and Carolina's works, they're very they just don't lose their power. It's they stay relevant for forever, and that's what I love about the works that we're producing, is that these are collections that no matter when you pick them up, or if it's the first time, it's gonna hold that power. It doesn't fade with the years like other things. It's not like a newspaper where it's old news the next day and we're on to the next thing. No, it's stuff that you can read today, and it'll heal you, and it'll give you something to think about, no matter how long it's been in print.
Yeah. Do you want to read something from your new book that kind of like embodies that piece, or like the kind of like what you're describing of what you're trying to cultivate in yourself despite, like the moment that we're living through?
Sure. Let me here. So this the title of this poem is Pope Francis bobblehead figurine. I have a Pope Francis figurine on my desk, and every now and again I tip his head and he bounces around. Um, I have poems sitting outside my door, under the bed, near the water bowl the dogs used to drink, out back near the grave of our chicken, on the mulch around the rose bushes, inside the piping that allows for water to come through our shower head, in the mirror, all waiting to sit on my fingertips. I sit with my fingers laying on the Shift L, D, and S key on my computer keyboard. I look at the Pope Francis bobblehead figurine and tap the head so it bounces around. I look at the art my daughter gave me for Father's Day some years back and smile. I stare at the books on my desk: Cast, An American Sunrise, Essential Bukowski, and In Search of Duende. I sharpen a pencil and sit back on my leather chair. My phone has a podcast playing, and I can hear the news coming from the TV in the living room. I think of the books in the other room, how I returned the dog with mange to recover before we brought it home to foster it. and the shoes I left in a hotel room in Corpus Christi. I inhale the gum mint vape that is tasting more metallic than minty. My phone sits in my backpack, never returned after the upgrade. I come across a cougar or bear in my dreams. Is it a, is it a recurring one where I always get away? I am too old and fat to win at a race, and so I feel safe in this room, where paper cuts and gout is the only risk. It's 9 p.m., and I just finished a cold cup of coffee. There have been times where I let the cup sit and I gulp a fly into my mouth and spit it out. No one talks about knives much. People talk about guns. I've had dreams.
Oh no, did he freeze? It looks like he dropped out. Okay, maybe he'll come back in. Um, but yeah, there's I wanted to make sure we did have some time at the end, just to sort of like sit with everything. And I don't know if it makes sense to go back to SpaceX. Like, do people know what's happening with SpaceX? Do people know what Boca Chica is? I don't know how many folks here are sort of like from the region versus outside of the region. Cool. Yeah, Carolina, do you want to, or all three of us, we can piece it together.
I'd like to see where she was going with the ending, with asking the questions, which are not clear in my mind anymore, but I'd like to find out. Yeah.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad he was able to join today. I can give a quick, like a very superficial synopsis, and if anyone wants to join and add a little bit more, please do so. Um, so Elon Musk moved into or colonized Boca Chica. Boca Chica is a beach off in the borderland off of in the Gulf of Mexico. I believe. Um,
For the river, the Rio Grande empties into the Gulf, right?
into the Gulf, right there. So, Elon Musk colonized that space, that particular space, and built a star base there. And if you go there, he actually has like his own city, his own town. Or when I went, you could see the different buildings where the employees actually live in that area. And you can't really go in, but you could see his rocket in the back, and there were several like replacement rockets. I went very early on, so I didn't see any people, although the presence of people had to have been there because there were, vehicles, but I didn't see any people at all. It was very concerning to go and to smell. The smell just didn't smell like beach or didn't smell like water or what you typically think of when you go to the beach. And I know that that area, Boca Chica, is very sacred, especially to people from the borderland or people who live in that proximity. It's a very sacred space. And so to have Elon Musk come and colonize that area really is an atrocity because it not only affects the people and the ancestral history of that land, or not even history, but the ancestral um, um, knowledge, the ancestral being of that land. It totally interrupts that, including the animalitos, like the animalitos and plants that are already present in that area. And so, yeah, I mean, you've seen all the rockets explode and all, these different things happening with no regard to the environment. And when I use that word, we don't use that word in my family. Um, but the environment more broadly, like everything that surrounds and is a part of people, assemblages of the more than human, etc. Yeah, so that's sort of a superficial view of the kind of shit that has gone into that water, that precious space. And yeah, the people have been fighting against that for a very long time without being heard. There are many activists on the ground doing the work of, staying trucha over there so that there is a way to resist. But it's all spectacular on TV. When you see it, we're gonna colonize Mars. It's spectacular, right? And often, very often, the voices of the people there and of the plants and animals there is completely erased with this colonial view of, the spectacular, if you will.
Yeah, and I posted a link to a story that Gage Davila, who's a contributing writer who's from that area, wrote for Deceleration a few months ago. And one of the things that he writes about the most, being from that community, is also the way that like local official, like it's a very colonial situation that you have like these also, and this is true in San Antonio too. It's just like a large part of like what my novel was about, like the local government, the ways that they're in league with, like, or at least don't stand up to these outside corporate interests that are coming into the community, right? And so so that the people who are fighting the impacts of SpaceX on their community are not just fighting Elon Musk and SpaceX, they're also having to like go up against like these corrupt like county officials, right? Who are like, oh, jobs or whatever. And really kind of facilitating that colonization. People like from the community, right? Who like vendidos, right?
Yeah, I
So
was
yeah,
gonna, s- yeah,
yeah,
I was gonna say, like, not to even create a monolithic lens on it either, because there are, just like you said, los vendidos, the people that are, welcoming that as well. Like our own people saying, yes, we need the jobs, we need the money, more than, you know, las plantitas y el agua y todo eso.
yeah. And not necessarily like vendidos that are like in the community, but like the people who have a little tiny bit of like local, like, the decision makers, right? That should be able to be like, no, or that should be standing up for the community or for like the environment.
Well, he is especially colonized in Brownsville, but the unique thing that has happened, or I think it's sort of distinctive in the last few months, is that maybe it was last winter, they voted, but it was just the people, they voted to become a town, to be incorporated. So now they have the right to make decisions, but it's almost all SpaceX people, and that does not include local folks. And then the other thing is that they're trying to make Boca Chica has always been a public beach, and there's distinctive ways that South Texas has, things that happen on their beaches, but they're trying to take away that public aspect to that beach, and that's along with all of the concerns about the ecological delta that is around there, and as well as the river and the riparian areas and the explosions landing in them, you've got an issue of democracy and a lack thereof, and especially for folks that have been fighting all sorts of things before Elon came along.
Right.
But
Yeah.
now,
And I was telling Gage, who wrote the author of the journalist who wrote the piece, I had just finished teaching at UTSA, and I had been teaching the Borders, Race and Literature class, and we read George Washington Gomez by Americo Paredes, who's writing about Brownsville, like based on his memories of like, the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and sort of like the local political structure there. And I was like, wow, like Americo Paredes would be turning in his grave, like at how little has changed
And
in,
how much?
right?
It's a real intensification. Yeah.
Yeah, because the same thing that Davila is writing about, like, is the stuff that Paredes is critical of in that novel and in this fictionalized like version of Brownsville. So it's interesting.
Except that I really think it is how do I say it? It's the epitome of what Trump and Elon Musk and stuff are doing across the nation in terms of denial of rights to the community that's surrounding and the land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Goes one step further. It is the same struggle, and then it goes one step further.
Yeah. And the other thing I picked up on that I thought was really interesting, and it kind of ties actually to something you were saying, Delcy, in your presentation this morning. So in the post-colonial eco-fiction panel, like you had mentioned the idea of the mesh, like from Timothy Morton. And I was thinking like how Carolina, what you're saying about like Ansaldua's concept of like nos otras, um, and the way that she writes about like the geography of the self, right? Like how she was almost like she was writing about that, like what Morton is writing about, right? Like, I mean, that was her dissertation, right? From the 1990s or something like so, like anticipating these concepts, right? That these eco-critical concepts, like in her own, it's like, yeah, in her own theorizing, right? Like from like this very embodied, like South Texas, um, fronteriza kind of like perspective. I don't know if you want to talk
There's
about
no
that too.
separation. Yeah, I would love to hear from Delcy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, hi everyone. So, first of all, I would like to thank you for the presentations. I'm here kind of amazed and shocked, yeah, with all this information. And as Marisol said, it has a lot to do with our earlier panel, yeah. So this idea of of colonizing, of taking the land, yeah. So uh, we are always talking about the 16th century colonization process, and although it has it has historically finished, yeah, it is still it is a massive presence, yeah. So Morton says that climate change is a hyper object, but I think that um, Western thought is also a hyper object in this sense. It is everywhere, and we don't realize it. We are not conscious because it is internalized. Yeah, and then we live by those patterns. Yeah. Uh, but now we are learning. Well, I think we have been learning how to criticize it for a long time. Yeah. So I read something about the SpaceX colonization, yeah, of that uh, place there in Mexico. But now listening from you, we see that it's really something too shocking, to grasp, to accept. Yeah. And that's why we need activism, as we were discussing earlier, Marisol, that Walter Mignolo says that that decoloniality is a practice. Yeah. As we were talking in the panel, and that's what we have to do. And this is true activism. There is no other way. Yeah.
Right.
So be it, protest by writing, yeah, or, whatever. And we are living very strange times. Yeah. I don't know how you. I don't know if I don't know if you live in the U.S., but my gosh, I don't know how you are going to cope with this. Yeah, and I don't know if you have enough time, but I have this personal view that it has a lot to do with patriarchy and how it is struggling. I don't know how it's seen that this idea of before the decadence, every system struggles. Yeah, it happened to the Roman Empire. Yeah, it didn't fall at once. We
Mhm.
had centuries before things fell apart, and I think it's happening with patriarchy, and we are seeing their attempt to react. Yeah, and it's a very ugly reaction, and we have to resist it. Or
Yeah.
I don't know.
We take a
I'm not
lot.
hopeful in this sense. Yeah, I'm like the dystopian fictions on climate change or our world nowadays. I'm not hopeful. Not with this kind of people, doing what they are doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know that we take a lot of like when Bolsonaro lost power, like that,
Yeah.
like that for us, I was like, oh my God, like that was hopeful, you know? Like if we
Yeah,
get
it was it was a nightmare. Yeah. So we are trying to do everything possible so that the far right here in Brazil, it doesn't prevail, but it's
yeah,
not easy. It's not easy at all. Yeah.
yeah,
But we'll fight
yeah.
bravely.
Me too. So yeah, solidarity with y'all.
Yeah, yeah, so we gotta do something, yeah, or we'll fall prey of this thought, this world view that is gonna kill us all. Okay, I'm not talking only about people, yeah,
Right.
everything, everything, because it's they don't care at all. Yeah, we don't know about what they care. Well, we know, but yeah, but it's amazing that there are still people thinking that the economy is the most important thing in the world. It's I don't know. I'm from another generation. Yeah, I'm 60 already, and I grew up learning, how to resist, how to fight against injustice. And I didn't think that I would grow old, seeing things repeating again and again and again. So it's a kind of depressing, but we still have some strength
Mhm.
to resist. Yeah.
Well,
So
thank you for your work and for coming. I know it's been a
yeah,
long day, like you were presenting in the
I thank
morning.
you for letting me, speak all of this. Yeah,
Sure.
we need to say this
Yeah,
so that we can, go on, move on, and go on.
right. Well, I just thank you so much to all of the panelists that came. I'm so grateful for this space. I'm so grateful for all of y'all's brilliance and your poetry and your decolonial thinking and acting. Um, and so we will publish this conversation to Deceleration along with some other report backs from the conference, just so that we can share all of this knowledge with our communities in the hopes that we can put it into action.